Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me to discuss decoding imposter syndrome. There are many myths and lots of misinformation out there, and I hope that today's presentation will help clarify some of the questions regarding what imposter syndrome is, what it's not, what can be done about it, and how it's measured. Let's start with talking about what imposter syndrome is. Simply, the definition is a debilitating form of cognitive bias and self-doubt of intellect, skill, or accomplishments. What does that mean? That means that highly intellectual, skilled, highly achieving, intelligent individuals have a bias against themselves and basically feel that they're not as good as everybody thinks they are. And any day now, their house of cards is going to come down when they're discovered as an imposter. The incidence is somewhere between 70 and 94%, and we'll get into some of these statistics in a minute. In 2024, Korn Ferry did a study, and they found that up to 71% of CEOs and up to 65% of other leaders admitted to having imposter syndrome. An interesting thing to note is that practitioners don't know how accurate statistics really are because you would have to be honest and admit to having these feelings on a questionnaire. And that is probably hard for certain leaders to do. They're supposed to be leading a company. So even if they're taking a private questionnaire, or an anonymous questionnaire, it's hard for them to admit it to themselves. We'll get into that in a little bit, but these are our working statistics to start. So before anybody gets overwhelmed, and when I give these presentations in person, I usually see a few people in the crowd sit back a little bit, their eyes get wide, because this can be a very difficult topic for someone who knows that they're feeling something, but not quite sure how to put it into words. You're in good company. Albert Einstein said, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." So as we go through this presentation, I want everybody to remember you're in good company in the sense that we're talking about high achieving, successful individuals who usually hit all of their metrics and their measures, but have this very difficult phenomenon happening in the background, and it makes daily life, work life, and personal life challenging. Imposter syndrome has a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities, on neurodivergent individuals, and on women. Intersectionality complicates that even more. We'll be focused a little bit more today on women because this presentation is for influential women. What is the effect on women? It's definitely more common in women. We've had statistics that say it isn't, but today I think most practitioners think that it is. Women who work in competitive environments are more prone to it. Women are probably generally more prone to perfectionism. There are societal constructs that can make it pretty hard on us. We're expected to be superstars, to be great at home, great at work, juggle all these balls in the air. That's really, really hard. There are people who believe that women belong in a home, in the home, and there are people who believe that women should go out there and break the glass ceiling and do everything. But all of those societal constructs which are placed on us make it difficult and complicate feelings of imposterism. Women tend to downplay their achievements and tend to avoid seeking recognition or advancement. There are some famous imposter CEOs. Imposter is in quotes because I do not believe that anybody is an imposter who is faking it. So I think it is important to say that loud and proud. These women are incredible and they are not imposters, but they have admitted to having imposter syndrome. Sheryl Sandberg, former CEO of Meta and Facebook, Arianna Huffington, the founder of HuffPost, and of course, Michelle Obama, who doesn't need any further introduction. We see a very high incidence of imposter syndrome in the healthcare fields. Overall, statistics tell us that about 62% of individuals in the healthcare fields experience imposter syndrome. 90% of medical students experience it. 76% of surgery residents, again in the slightly more high stakes fields within healthcare, and 85% of nurses who really carry the load in healthcare. In neurosurgery, we see some of the highest statistics, up to 94%. There were two different studies that were done in 2024, and they tested interns, residents, attending physicians in the departments, all the way up to leaders. And the statistics were staggering. And we think that the statistics are so high in that particular field because we're talking about the most high achieving individuals, the most high functioning in such a high stakes field. So when I mentioned intersectionality a little bit earlier, think of it in this context as, well, what if also, if you add being a woman onto that, what if it's a woman of color? What if it's a woman from another culture now working in an environment in this country? All of those aspects complicate the situation and make imposter syndrome even trickier and harder to deal with. So, what do we see in people who have imposter syndrome? Generally, there's a constellation of behaviors that is common, again, generally speaking, for all people who experience this phenomenon. Setting unrealistic standards for themselves, attributing achievements to external factors. That looks like, oh, I got a great performance review. I think my boss knows that I've been sort of burning the candle at both ends and life has been a little bit tricky, so she probably took pity on me. Or I did well because my team helped me. I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. That's attributing achievements to external factors. Fearing being discovered as a phony is a really, really big one. People with imposter phenomenon truly go through their work lives, and this spills into personal lives as well, feeling that any day now, their team, their boss is going to find out that they're faking it, that they're not as smart as everybody thinks. And that's a very debilitating fear when it's real and it's present in your life. That leads to engaging in self-sabotage. Well, maybe I won't put myself up for that promotion. Maybe I won't raise my hand in the meeting because I don't want anybody to find out. So when you don't put yourself out there for things and you engage in self-sabotage, you're getting a lot less job satisfaction, less promotions, less opportunities. And of course, engaging in overly strict self-evaluation, which is a result of all of this, makes it so difficult and unrealistic. How does imposter syndrome develop? Sorry, I skipped ahead too fast. How does imposter syndrome develop? Well, generally speaking, there are some cultural, environmental, or childhood patterns. It is different for everyone. And in coaching, we do talk about the different ways that people experience their own particular phenomenon. But speaking in generalities, there are several different ways. So these are just some examples. When you take a naturally intelligent person, the kid who learned how to read very early on, did great in grade school, the teacher loved them, they coasted through high school, got into their first choice college, that type of naturally smart, what we call gifted individual, the first time that they experience something difficult in life, for example, not getting into your first choice college or getting to college, now the workload is a little bit more challenging, or taking on your first job and it's not going as smoothly as you thought. Many, many different permutations. That person can basically hit the wall and say, whoa, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And when those feelings become internalized, these individuals start to develop feelings of imposterism, which leads to varying degrees of imposter phenomenon. That's one origin. Conversely, the hard worker, the person who hasn't coasted through life, the person who had to work really hard at everything, all the way from the beginning through today. They've had to put in the work. They were a hard, they were a studier, they were a hard worker. They studied in groups, they sought out their coaches, their tutors. They did everything that they could because they were always working hard. When they come across the people who are not working as hard, or they perceive that not working as hard, they can start to tell themselves, wow, I'm less than. An imposter phenomenon can ensue. And of course, there are trauma-based reasons for why imposter syndrome can develop, and that ranges from survivors of all sorts of trauma and perhaps even difficult family backgrounds. So these are just examples. This doesn't cover everything, but these are examples of how imposter syndrome can develop. And generally speaking, we see, and I am speaking in generalities a lot today, I'm giving you an overview because I feel that when we speak to individuals, they have their own story. So I just want to give you an overview of how this looks. We see two ineffective coping mechanisms that basically all people with imposter syndrome have in common: over-preparation or procrastination. So, how it looks is the person who tells themselves, I need to prepare. I need to get ahead of it, well ahead of time. I need to do more than everybody else. I need to do 10 minutes every night, or I need to put in an hour every night. I need to start a month in advance. Whatever it is, they're preparing way more than they have to proportionately to the project. We also see the procrastinator who's afraid of presenting or taking on the project. They procrastinate. They don't do it until the night before. And I actually have a very, very successful client who talks to me a lot about this and has gotten a lot better about this and has shed some of his symptoms. He was always procrastinating because it caused so much anxiety that he just couldn't get to it. And now he's doing things a week in advance with an appropriate level of preparation, and he's feeling a lot better. What we see with these two groups of over-preparers and procrastinators is basically the same cycle. Excessive worry and fear are just part of the overall feeling, and an assignment is given, whatever it is. You take the over-preparer or the procrastinator, whichever is their mechanism, they're going to get there because we're talking about high-achieving individuals who do well. It's just what they put themselves through internally. Inevitably, they're going to meet their goals and accomplish what they set out to do. And when it's over, there's going to be a brief sense of relief. The small exhale, which is followed by a failure to internalize their objective success. That's where the gap occurs. And the failure to internalize the objective success leads to fear of being discovered as an imposter. So the very next time that an assignment is given, excessive worry and fear ensue. The over-preparer does too much, the procrastinator does everything last minute, and the cycle continues. Why is imposter syndrome so hard to admit? Well, for CEOs, there is the concept of loneliness at the top, head of their company. Who are they going to tell that they think that they're phony? Maybe they deny it to themselves. Maybe they deny it to others. Maybe they engage in masking. There's definitely a shame element to all of that. And if you admit it, will there be repercussions? So there's shame and fear, and definitely stigma. And for some, there are also cultural implications. People of different cultures working in companies in the United States, perhaps, they feel maybe that they need to prove themselves more than the average individual, and they need to hide it. It's hard to admit. That's why I say that I'm a little bit skeptical about some of the statistics possibly being skewed lower, because this isn't something that anybody wants to step up and say at work Well, I think I'm a phony, and any day now, you guys are all going to discover that I'm not as good as I thought I was, not as good as you thought I was, for sure. And the problem with that is it's not a joke. These people actually feel this way and live in fear of being discovered. It is hard to admit. Let's talk about some of the myths and the misconceptions because we hear this all the time. What imposter syndrome is not is humility or modesty. People can be perfectly modest and have imposter syndrome or not have imposter syndrome, but it does not define the phenomenon itself. It's not just, oh, I'm being humble and I don't want to show off. That's not imposter syndrome. That's humility. It's also not run-of-the-mill perfectionism. And the reason I call it run-of-the-mill, some perfectionists don't have imposter syndrome. It's a little bit harder to have imposter syndrome and not have any degree of perfectionism. Imposter syndrome is also not just beginner's doubt. If you're new at something, it's probably a good idea to have a little bit of doubt to drive an appropriate self-evaluation, see what more you have to do to learn, and see what more you have to do to get where you want to go. That's appropriate. When it goes off the other side of the chart, it's no longer appropriate. So I don't look at imposter syndrome. Many people say that they have imposter syndrome at the beginning. That is possible, but those people usually get through it. So normal jitters are not imposter syndrome. They can be a little bit at the beginning, but if you outgrow it, you're not living with this phenomenon for the rest of your life. Imposter syndrome is not commensurate with reality. We spoke about external measures to the contrary, not attributing success to your own accomplishments, attributing it to external measures. That is not commensurate with reality. These are very exaggerated feelings that individuals have, and imposter syndrome is not on the DSM-5 yet. I don't know if it will be. So I want to talk a little bit about amygdala hijacking because that is what happens in the body when, for lack of a better term, the panic response sets in. The amygdala is a peanut-sized part of the brain that processes emotions, specifically fear and anxiety. An amygdala hijack is when the brain's emotional center triggers an intense, irrational fight or flight response. And it's a reaction to a perceived threat, but it overrides the rational prefrontal cortex and leads to impulsive actions, an overreaction in non-life-threatening situations. So what happens in the brain is there's hormone flooding, fight or flight response is activated, and rationality wanes. You haven't asked yourself, is this feeling merited? You just go with it because you're flooded, emotions heighten, and because of that, cognitive impairment ensues. So, what is the impact of all of that? The impact of imposter syndrome is difficult, and it's serious, and it is real. It results in burnout, in reduced personal growth, in low self-esteem, missed opportunities, definitely lower job satisfaction because, as you can imagine, people who are living with this every day, it's very hard to be really internalizing your successes and the satisfaction in your role. And that leads to behavioral health issues and physical ramifications as well. Um, Difficulty sleeping, headaches, stomach aches. So, how is imposter syndrome measured? The Clance imposter phenomenon scale is one scale that practitioners use to assess whether an individual is experiencing this imposter phenomenon. It is self-reported. It's very simple to take. It's 20 questions. Each question is graded on a scale of 1 to 5, and the scores are added up at the end. 0 to 40 points represent few imposter phenomenon feelings. 41 to 60 represent moderate. 61 to 80 represent frequent symptoms, and more than 80 represent intense symptoms. I want to read a few questions to you so that you understand just a little bit of how the questionnaire is structured and what it's basically trying to cull out for the individual. Here's an example of a question. I sometimes think I obtained my present position or gained my present success because I happened to be in the right place at the right time or knew the right people. So 1, not at all true. 2, rarely. 3, sometimes. 4, often. And 5, very true. I'll read a few more questions so that you can get the essence of what the questions are trying to discern. I tend to remember the incidents in which I have not done my best more than those times that I have done my best. So for a person with intense symptoms, they might say very true. For a person with very few, they might say rarely or sometimes. Here's another one. It's hard for me to accept compliments or praise about my intelligence or accomplishments. So this one goes right to the root of some of the things we've discussed. Sometimes I'm afraid others will discover how much knowledge or ability I really lack. I'm often afraid that I may fail at a new assignment or undertaking, even though I generally do well at what I attempt. When I succeed at something and receive recognition for my accomplishments, I have doubts that I can keep repeating that success. That one goes to external measures. I lucked out. That's what this question goes to. I often compare my ability to those around me and think they may be more intelligent than I am. So that can go both towards the naturally intelligent person and the hard worker. So we see how that manifests, and it's a very easy questionnaire to take and do a self-assessment and see where you are, if anybody has an interest in that. In practice, coaches, psychologists see 5 types of imposters. Again, I put that in quotes because I don't think anybody is an imposter. It's what the person themselves believe, and they are not. So I full stop there. The first type is a perfectionist. So that's the person who sets unrealistically high standards for themselves. And when they fail to meet those standards, they think that they're a fraud or that they're a phony. We also see a superhuman who feels that they should know everything about everything and in their field. And if they don't, if they need to reach out, if they come across something that they don't know, the feelings of imposterism really, really surface. The natural genius is the person that we spoke about a few minutes ago, the person who's always done well. So when they come across something that is more difficult for them to process, and maybe this is why we also see it such high incidence in the healthcare fields, because generally these are people that have done so well in school, but medical school is rigorous and difficult. Residency is difficult and rigorous. These are people who could possibly say to themselves, wait a minute, not so gifted anymore. The soloist is the person who feels that they have to accomplish everything on their own. They don't want to reach out to a tutor, a coach, a peer, because they feel that that further exacerbates imposterism for themselves because they should be able to do it on their own. They believe that this is who they are. They do it on their own. They don't need any help. If they ask for help, surely this shows that they're an imposter. And the expert is the person that believes that they need to excel in every single field, in work, in family, in social life. That's a highly, highly unrealistic expectation of ourselves. So, as you can imagine, these are all very difficult to live with. People can experience more than one of these types. People can also go through um, from one type to another throughout their lives. I had somebody in a presentation I recently did who said to me, I used to be a perfectionist, but as I've aged, I don't feel that I'm a perfectionist so much. But because I'm older and more seasoned in my field, I feel that I need to be an expert. I need to lead my department and be socially a superstar. And because I've been working for so many years, I should have it all right. So when I get home, I should have all of that set without any hiccups along the way, and certainly in my field of expertise. In case anybody is overwhelmed, I want to bring it down a little bit and again depict another woman who is very, very, very highly accomplished and has imposter syndrome. Jodie Foster has said, I thought everybody would find out and they take the Oscar back. They'd come to my house, knocking on the door. Excuse me, we meant to give that to someone else. That was going to Meryl Streep. I don't think anybody thinks that Jodie Foster didn't deserve her Oscar. But in this next slide, here's what Meryl Streep said. Not to Jodie Foster, but individually about her own imposter syndrome. You think, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? And I don't know how to act anyway. So what am I doing here? Or why am I doing this? This is difficult. This isn't something that's said for attention. This is something that is real. This is something that people feel. It's intense and it interferes with daily life. So usually when I give these presentations in person, I ask the crowd an exaggerated question. Would you climb a mountain without tools or a guide? And everybody says no or shakes their hands. Sometimes I ask for a show of hands. But people are living with imposter syndrome without tools or a guide, and it can be mitigated. Takes a little bit of work. I don't generally talk about recovery because I don't know if somebody who scores a 95 is ever going down to a 0. There are certain predispositions and tendencies that people who have imposter syndrome have, and that's okay. So we talk about mitigating it, we talk about recognizing it, and we talk about living an easier life alongside it. That's my personal philosophy. So this is my makeshift mountain and the pathway that I sort of devised towards helping individuals achieve mitigation of their symptoms and an easier life. The first step and the widest step along the bottom is recognition. You need to recognize that there's an issue. And once you've recognized it and identified it, you need to reach out for help. And when you reach out to a coach, a therapist, a mentor, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you learn how to reject that negative self talk and reframe the way that you perceive yourself and what is happening. And to make it easy, I called it the 4 R's: recognize, reach out, reject, and reframe. So when I work with clients in coaching on a mitigation strategy, the first thing we do, and many practitioners do this, is we look at the root causes. It's not for the sake of judging up your entire childhood and everything bad that's ever happened and putting blame. That's not what it is at all. It's in order to understand why you have it, because understanding the why goes a long way towards mitigating it and feeling better. The next step is identifying the triggers. Those triggers are different for everybody. There are people who sit in offices that have glass walls and glass cubicles, and they see their boss walking towards their cubicle or their glass office, walking down the hallway. Well, that boss may not even be walking towards you. But if somehow that boss has become a trigger, then Imposter phenomenon symptoms escalate for that individual. And so recognizing that as a trigger is very important. For other people, it's different things. Public speaking, um, students in law school, they have to engage in mock trial if that's something that they have never done before, or if that's not an activity that they enjoy, or being called on in class, that's their trigger. So again, the why, recognizing the roots, why this might be happening to me and what are my triggers leads to transformation. That's where we work on tools, breathing exercises, strategies that help examine reality, examine what's happening around us, the evidence, is it real, the self-talk, and starting to transform the way that we see ourselves, speak to ourselves, conduct ourselves. There are many strategies that work. Education is a great first step. Doing your research, signing up for a presentation like this, bringing in speakers, reading about it, understanding it. Skill development, which is something that is learned in coaching or mentorship or therapy. Support groups are very helpful, especially when people are willing to be honest and express how they're feeling, and people see that it's common and they're not the only ones. And organizational support is invaluable when organizations are willing to bring in coaches, willing to bring in speakers that explain what all of this, because of course it's so prevalent in different high stakes fields. We see it in business and STEM fields and healthcare fields. Organizational support is very important. So it was my pleasure and honor to be here with you today. I hope that you learned a lot. If you want to reach me, you can reach me through my website. There's a contact page. It's the easiest way to find me. You can also email me directly. I'm happy to answer further questions or work with you.